Pleasure to be here. Hi, everyone. So as Shireen said, so my name's Talha. So pleasure to be presenting to you all today. So before I actually start sharing my screen, I'm going to keep the session fairly relaxed and informal. What I'm going to do is walk you through just my career journey in terms of what I've done over the course of my 20 years that I've been working. Some of the key insights that I've learned, how that's kind of helped me and shaped me in my career. Based on my previous work, I have worked with fintechs. So I've prepared a couple of slides on how fintechs can actually pitch to potential corporate partners. So I'm going to be sharing that with you today. And then really, I'm going to open up the floor to some questions because the idea is to really, that's, I think, for me, the most beneficial part of this session. So what you'll find is probably my slides I'll get through fairly quickly, and hopefully there's enough content in there which then trigger some response from you. So I think there's a couple of ways you can engage with me. So I believe you can raise your hand, and then obviously I think you'll be allowed to speak, and then you can ask your question. You can chat, or you can put your question in writing, and I'll read it out. So let's get started. So just give me 30 seconds whilst I get my screen ready. Okay, so I hope you can see, yep, it says participants can see my application. So let me just start the slideshow and then we'll get started. So brief agenda for today. I'm going to talk about, well, as I mentioned, my career journey, and then pitching to corporate partners. I'm then just going to outline at the end how I can help you, and then open the floor up to questions. Now, just one legal kind of disclaimer here. I'm here in my personal capacity because I am really enthusiastic and passionate about the startup ecosystem and the digital ecosystem here in the UAE. So anything that I say today is all my personal views. They don't reflect the views or are attributable to any company that I've worked for in the past or present. So just to put that out there. So firstly, a little bit more about myself. So firstly, from a professional perspective, I majored in economics back in the UK at Manchester Metropolitan. I've been predominantly in the banking industry, had a brief stint in insurance, and currently I've now moved into the technology sector. But other than that, my focus has primarily been banking. And I've done really a number of different roles, which I'm going to go into briefly. But now for the past 6 years, my focus has very much been around the digital and innovation space. On the personal front, I'm 40, proud father to 4 very boisterous young boys under the age of 10. So it's a very active household in the Khan household. And outside of work, my big passion really is food, avid foodie. So yeah, if you need tips on restaurants and stuff, I can probably help you with that as well. So my career journey started back in 2002 and with one of the major banks in the UK, and then carried on in the banking arena until I moved out to the UAE around 4 years ago now. And since that time, my focus has been very much in the digital space. So some of the companies I mentioned here, but I'll go into a little bit more detail about each one now. So if we start way back when, so what I like to call the operational phase of my career. So back in 2001, I was still at university, and I got a job, part-time job on a Saturday as a cashier, a bank teller in a bank that was then known as Lloyds TSB. Now it's Lloyds Banking Group. And for me, that's all it was at the time. It was just somewhere that I went on a Saturday for a few hours, worked and dealt with customers, and that was it. I went full-time over the summer, so I got to do that on a daily basis. And because I was doing economics, I thought, no, I'm gonna graduate and get a degree in economics and join an investment bank in Canary Wharf. So obviously, when I graduated, what happened was I joined the management trainee scheme for Lloyds TSB, and the way the scheme was structured was that there were 2 years, first year in the branches. So I kind of carried on my role, but moved away from cashiering into frontline sales, like personal account manager, and day-to-day operational management of the branch. And the era that I was working in, this is the, from a banking perspective at least, the pre-digital, pre-smartphone era. So here, I mean, online banking had arrived, but it was still very niche. Adoption was very, very low. Not all banks were offering. In fact, only a minority of banks actually had this. The big focus for banks at this point in time was telephony. So telephone banking was the big thing that everyone wanted to push and get as much customers migrated onto telephony. That first year in the branch for me as part of the management trainee scheme, it really gave me a real good in-depth understanding and appreciation of both the business, the brand, and what it meant to the customers. Because I was dealing with customers day in, day out, looking them in the face, in the whites of their eyes, seeing them. I saw the good, the bad, and the ugly. The good experiences, when they were unhappy, everything. And really that customer-facing experience for my entire career, that initial 1-2 years that I had, was just invaluable. It's really set a solid foundation stone, because and I am a firm believer now that if you want to truly understand the business, you need to work in that customer-facing arena. No amount of focus groups or surveys or anything like that is going to compensate for that ever. The next part of the management trainee scheme was then a head office rotation. So I left the lush green fields of Northern England, as you saw in the previous slide, for the hustle and bustle of the big smoke, aka London. Now here, the next part of my management training scheme was around product management. Now, not product management in the digital sense, but in the old world sense, where we are actually working on building the bank products. I was in student and graduate banking, and then my final stint was in policy and risk function. And then I took on a full-time role off the graduate scheme in a strategy and planning role. Now, from here, it was a case of zooming out from the branch and then from the head office, getting that macro view of the business and looking at things in a completely different light. Even though I was still with Lloyds TSB, it was like coming to work for a different company, because of the working style was different, the culture was different. But that initial year in the business gave me the credibility so that when I put policies together, put strategies together, I had that grounding. I knew exactly what our customers wanted. From a personal point of view, for me, it meant a broadening of my horizons in terms of appreciating workplace culture. In the branches, it was very much command and control for the most part, and very much you had a routine. In the head office, it's a completely different sort of pressure, different sort of environment. The thinking is not on a day-to-day or a week-to-week basis. It's on a monthly, 3-month, 6-month, 9-month, yearly basis. And also stakeholder management, which became really important. And then along with that, getting to grips with concepts like emotional intelligence, understanding how people tick and how to conduct negotiations, meetings with them. Until 2008, I stayed with Lloyds TSB. After, in 2008, I actually moved back up north, and that's where I'm originally from, to Manchester. And I joined the cooperative bank, and there I was chief of staff to the CEO. So I talked about the macro view and looking at things from a head office environment. Here, you take that up one more level. You sat around the same table as the CEO and the exec directors, and this was just a whole different ball game in terms of that corporate strategic development of the business, external factors, looking at them. So this all really helped broaden that outlook about the banking sector. And this is a time of the credit crunch in the UK. So obviously a lot of bad things happening to banks. And then after that, I moved into very much a delivery type role. So project management, business readiness. Now, around this time is when there was something that I kind of call the digital awakening almost. It's not an official term, obviously, but just because there was a realization amongst bank staff about something is happening in the world of digital. It wasn't, and even actually the term digital didn't exist then. It's like, things are happening on the web. More companies are launching mobile apps. Should we be launching a mobile app? Those sorts of questions started to surface before around 2008, 2010. And companies started to get a bit more serious about digital. And really, to the latter part of my career with the cooperative bank was when I delved further into this digital space, deepening the knowledge about digital, getting involved in the actual digital transformation program of the bank in terms of launching the new app and everything. And from that point on, I kind of knew that I had to carry on my career path within digital. So notice a small typo on the previous slide. It's set to 2017. It was actually 2015. But in 2015, I moved into my first full-time digital role within NatWest Group. They were creating a separate bank. And within that, they had put together a digital team, and I joined that. And this was very much like a startup environment, but within a corporate. So it was like a venture being created within this big banking group, which is why I refer to this as the entrepreneurial phase. And this was about building the bank's digital capability from scratch. So putting the team together, drawing out the journeys that the customers would be going through, et cetera, et cetera. Then along came a small external event called Brexit. And with that came a lot of uncertainty, the Brexit referendum, that is. And with that uncertainty came the decision by NatWest Group at that time to wind down the project to launch this new bank. And as a result, I then moved into a different part of the business, but carrying on in a digital role. So this was really, for me, quite symbolic of how some startups operate. That you start up with all the enthusiasm, with all the motivation to do something. You are hit with an unfortunate event and you have to then wind down and move on to something else. So that adapting to change and uncertainty, up until now, everything had been quite smooth in my career path, but that was quite difficult to get to grips with. But it was something that I had to deal with, and came out of that relatively unscathed. I joined the international division of Royal Bank of Scotland. So that was split between Manchester and Jersey, which was personally a fantastic thing, because it working in the Channel Islands was a great experience as a centre of banking, long established centre of banking. And then started what I call my digital phase, truly digital phase, which is from 2017 to the present day. It started with me landing here in Abu Dhabi for an opportunity that was presented to me. And for the first time, I actually stepped out of the banking sector altogether, joined the National Health Insurance Company in Daman in their digitalization and innovation team. And this was an exciting phase as well. Again, a new company formed, a new team formed rather, starting up with our own corporate venture. This is the first time that I then started interacting with, as vendors, with insurtechs and having partnerships with them. Because up until now, vendors for me had just been the big technical vendors, but now small startups based in Europe, here in the UAE, we started working with them. And we actually helped, I was part of the team that launched a new venture within Daman. And now, for those of you who have insurance with Daman, you'll know of a partnership with Okadoc. I'm not going to take credit for that, but the seeds that were planted have evolved into that thing, I would say now. I hope I don't get into trouble with Daman for saying that, but that's something which was really exciting. I then moved into ADIB. I took on the head of innovation role, and that's really where my relationship with the FinTech Hive started, because just that deep engagement with the UAE startup and digital ecosystem was embedded. We were a corporate partner of FinTech Hive. We invited startups in 2 years in a row. Obviously before that as well. So I just managed the process for 2 years. But this really allowed me to truly appreciate the richness of this startup ecosystem here in the UAE that we have, and it kind of cemented my desire really to work with fintechs, work with startups more deeply, because that was a significant part of my role at ADIB, in addition to helping to drive corporate innovation, which is in terms of changing the mindset, the culture, and encouraging this notion of intrapreneurship rather than entrepreneurship within the corporate environment. I've now moved into the world of AI, so now deep diving into this, only a few months old into this. I'm not going to talk too much about this, but that kind of brings my career journey summary to an end. What I wanted to now touch upon was something which I thought would be of benefit to hopefully the gathered audience today, specifically around pitching to corporate partners, because this is something where I was one of the corporate partners. I was fielding inquiries, calls, emails from fintechs, and I hope that what I've put together here just serves to give you all some guidance and tips. I'm sure some of this you know already, but I just think it would be useful to hear from the other side, from your perspective, in terms of what the corporates would be looking for. So first and foremost, I talked at the very beginning in my career journey about getting to know the business, getting to know the customers that we were serving at Lloyd's TSB. And actually the same principle applies here to you as fintechs and entrepreneurs wanting to link up with corporate partners. Know your customer, know your audience, know what they're all about, know what their value proposition is, and know how it is that you can actually work collaboratively and to a mutual advantage for both of yourself. I know it sounds obvious, but it just pays to do some homework about the business, what they're about, what they've done, what you know of their plans from what you've been gathered in the press, because it just shows that you've taken a deep and keen understanding. Now, in terms of actually preparing for the meeting, now I was under the impression that maybe the members of the FinTech Hive cohort were going to be here. So this is maybe worded slightly towards them, but it, I think, is equally applicable for others as well. But in terms of just getting ready for the meeting, the amount of times that I hosted people where they had arrived not actually prepared, they've not actually researched who was on the attendee list in terms of who was there, or really reached out to me to say, you know what, we needed to speak to somebody in compliance or risk or something like this. And but what I mean by this particular point is, firstly, network with that main point of contact that you have before that session, and really get to understand if that person is the person that you need to see, if they will be the decision maker who will help you get your foot in the door. If you know of attendees who are going to be your potential partners. So for example, your main point of contact may just be the introducer. The actual partner may be somebody else. You can either leverage your main point of contact or network with them directly and say, look, I'm meeting such and such a person. I really think you ought to be at this meeting as well. Obviously keep everyone in the loop, but network is really, really important. Always, I can't really highlight the importance of networking high enough. It's just invaluable. And again, it sounds obvious, the next point about tailoring your pitch or presentation, but the amount of presentations that I saw that weren't tailored to us as a company, it was just shocking sometimes, actually. So make it relevant to them, make the content relevant to them, make sure that you've tried to anticipate the problem areas that your solution is likely to help them with. Make reference to news that is involving that particular company. And also a very simple point, use their logos in your presentation collateral. I unfortunately have had one presentation where it had another company's logo. So it's just about preparation. Preparation really is key. It's your first meeting with them. Make sure you make a good impression. Now, this is speaking more from a banking aspect, but banks, as well as maybe insurance companies that you're going to be dealing with, if you're an insurtech, highly regulated entities. Therefore, know your regulatory landscape. And what I mean by this specifically is that some people get confused with, well, okay, I'm set up in such and such a free zone, and I've been approved by that free zone, therefore my solution is okay for you. That's not the case. Banks are not subject to, they're subject to onshore regulations and onshore regulations alone. And again, I'm basing this on experience where I've had, unfortunately, had to explain to someone, with all due respect, this is not applicable to us. You need to build a solution which meets the onshore regulations for banks. So that's a very key point, especially if you're dealing with financial institutions or regulated entities. It's very clear, it's very important to have a clear, concise elevator pitch, and then also the actual presentation itself. Articulate the problem very clearly in terms of how it impacts the organization or the industry that they operate in. Make sure you've researched what is a potential target size of the opportunity that you can present to that particular institution, and then link it all back. this is the problem, this is the target size, this is how my solution helps you to address this problem, and how you as your fintech can help. If you have the relevant approvals in place from the relevant bodies, highlight them, put them there, because these are some of the questions that are going to be coming up, because this is the types of things that I would ask. So, well, okay, who have you had your solution approved by? Where have you tested this previously? Have you got credentials that you can present? And make sure, again, seems like an obvious thing, that you have all the key people from your side present. Nowadays, I guess it's easier because we all do this via Zoom or Teams. But when people, when you say, oh, well, we would have spoken to you about this, but such and such couldn't join us today. No, have every single person who is likely to be thrown a question with you at the session. Another thing which is actually extremely valuable to potential corporate partners is for you to actually have a working demonstration or a prototype. PowerPoints are okay. They can only do so much. Okay, you can't go beyond that. So let me just see. I've got a question in. I'm just going to pause briefly whilst I just look at this. So the question is, can a fintech with DIFC license work with bank with a direct customer facing solution? Now this one, I'm not 100% sure if this is applicable. Now, it depends on what the solution is. I think there are certain activities which would require, for example, central bank regulation, central bank to be involved as well. But for certain activities, it really depends on the activity type, which is why I'm not able to give a clear yes or no answer to that. So my advice on that one would be to ask for the relevant compliance person from the institution to be at the meeting as well, or make it very clear that, look, this, try and do that homework you can. I'm not sure if FinTech Hive can help in that respect in terms of linking it with the right people, but that will be worth exploring as well. So where I was at was, so PowerPoint only limited in terms of how much they can help you. Concepts, if you present a concept to someone, okay, again, it doesn't really do much because a concept is very much like one of those brochures you see for a housing development, which shows, you know, lush green forests and a running stream, etc., etc. Until you actually build a show home and you allow people to go in and have a look, saying this could what you potentially how your house could look. That then makes it real for that individual. The same goes for banks. Build a prototype, show them a working prototype that can actually bring that solution to life. And if you can do this through a sandbox or a simulator environment, fantastic. That'll be ideal for them. And really make it hard for them to say no to you, because, and how you can do this, and I appreciate there's effort involved from a fintech side, and that effort doesn't come for free, but where possible, try for those prospects where you think that, you know, I've got a really good chance here, offer a limited free trial or a POC. Make it really difficult for them to turn around and say no, because I'll be honest, if somebody came around, offered a solution that I thought, wow, this is fantastic, and then said, you know what, we'll give you a POC for 3 months free, I would never say no to that. Because it means I didn't have to get approvals. It means that I could basically bring you in and then showcase that to internal stakeholders. And that's really increasing your likelihood of success. Like I said, granted, that effort doesn't come for free. So pick and choose and really be selective to who you offer it to. So where you think there's a real chance of where you can make a difference, but that's what I would do. Now, in addition of, screen is now, okay, there we go. In terms of what to do, there's also what not to do. And these, unfortunately, are inspired by actual events. So firstly, don't argue with the person that you're meeting or the corporate partner that you're meeting. If you disagree, it's better to bite your tongue, in my view, and just maybe think that that isn't the partner for you, but do not get into an argument. Going back to my regulatory point, do not try to second guess the regulation here. If you are speaking to a compliance person, and this is the particular example I'm talking about, where an individual was arguing with the compliance person to say, well, no, this is allowed, and compliance person went, no, it's not, etc. So don't just get into an argument, or for that matter, argue with each other in front of the corporate partner. So just obvious thing to say, but unfortunately I have seen it, so hence bringing it here. And the final thing, which again is something that you kind of shouldn't need to tell people, but actually happened, is when you are in the room, be present in the room in all its ways. So that means phone calls, they can wait. Put your phone on silent, not on vibrate, completely silent. Don't, as happened when I was in a meeting, leave that meeting with the gathered corporate partner in mid-session to take the call, assuming that your other colleagues can carry on. That does not leave a good impression with the corporate partners. So that's just brief presentation. I say brief, we're at halfway mark. In terms of, how I can help, like I said, I'm really enthusiastic about the ecosystem, so I can act as a sounding board. Time permitting, I can support in terms of listening to demo sessions. If, again, depending on how I can help, if I can leverage my network, that's something that I can explore. And there's other ways that if you want to reach out to me, we can see how I might be able to help. And that really brings the whole thing to a close. So I'll stop there and open it up for questions. And if there's no questions, then we can have a half an hour back in the calendars. Okay, we have one. So how was the cultural transition from the UK to the Middle East? This was actually not that difficult. I've been to the UAE several times in the past, so I was reasonably familiar with the region, the UAE in particular. So I was a regular visitor prior to this as a tourist, and actually this was something that I was proactively working on. So for me, the transition is actually great, and no issues from that perspective. In terms of banking and the working lifestyle, that is slightly different. Obviously, the maturity isn't here, and some of the is still a developing financial sector, not as well established as back in the UK. But then that also brings with it a dynamism, which is actually quite exciting to be part of, because that's something that we didn't have in the UK. That it became, given the maturity of the market. So that dynamism of this particular market is something that I really enjoy. Got another question about how would you bounce back from rejections? Great question. What I would do is, firstly, don't be afraid to ask for feedback. If in my instances, whenever there was a partner that we weren't going to be working with, or we couldn't work with, I was very open and gave feedback. And I always try to make it constructive. Now, in the case that you just get a rejection, reach out to the person that you met with and just try and understand what it was that made them reach that particular decision. Because what that then does is give you something to work on in terms of how you can then address those particular gaps, or indeed see if those gaps can be addressed or not. It may just be that your particular solution isn't mature enough yet. And I get this, and I get that comes with its own challenge about the chicken and the egg question, that until you get the experience with somebody, you can't get that maturity. But it just means that perhaps you need to look at a different partner, maybe not someone as big, maybe a smaller partner who is willing to take more of a risk, because that's the other thing that you need to bear in mind, that the bigger the institution and the less mature a particular potential fintech, the bigger the risk for them in terms of trying to partner with them. Now, that said, there are other ways that you can do this. I think there are some sandbox environments being created here in the UAE, which you might be able to leverage as a means of raising your profile. But yeah, feedback for sure. Network with that particular individual. Ask that individual maybe if they know of anyone that they can introduce you to, because I was very well connected with my contemporaries doing similar jobs in the other banks here in the UAE. So it may well be that it's not right for us, but I could actually make a call for you to say, well, you know what, why don't you get in touch with so and so. So but you don't know these things until you reach out to the individual and ask. Granted, some people may be closed and not offer anything, but you need to ask. You can't just make the assumption that they're not going to give you any feedback. Okay, any other questions? Okay, we've got one more. And two more actually, so okay. So first question is, what would you say is the best way to answer a question that you don't have the answer to when pitching? Okay, so that's, firstly, it's not a, it's absolutely fine to not know, to not have the answer. And one of the easiest ways to do this is to say, thank you very much for your question. We'll make a note of this and I'll get back to you. Now that isn't, don't be afraid of saying that. Now, obviously the challenge would be if you have introduced yourself as an expert in a particular field and the question relates to that particular field, then it might be a little bit more challenging. However, I would never look unfavorably on anyone who basically takes something away to then revert to me. The only thing I would qualify that with is make sure you then revert to that person with the answer. It's all, and try and do it as quickly as possible, because you need it to be fresh in that person's mind. A few days late will be too late in my view. If you can, the next day, if you can answer at the latest, that would be a good way of getting about that, I think. Next question that we have is, thank you very much. Okay, chatbots get used for filtering offers, but obviously can't evaluate the human contributory value. Can one counter that at all? If I can just pose a question back to you, when you say chatbots get used for filtering offers, are you talking here about job offers? If you're able to just clarify that for me. Because that's how I'm interpreting the question. Okay, so we'll just wait for that person to come back to us. Machines seem to filter every communication. Well, okay, in this particular case, I know what you mean in terms of if you go, I mean, it depends really on the if your communication is going to a mailbox which has like a department name, then yes, chances are possibly it will be filtered. However, if you are emailing a person, then it is likely to be that particular individual. Now, obviously, emails get clogged, What I would encourage you to do is just be proactive in trying to get access to that individual in other ways. I mean, LinkedIn is obviously very active here. Everyone has an active LinkedIn profile. Most people have their contact details on that. If you have the premium version of LinkedIn, you can send in-mail. Now, granted, a lot of people use this for spam as well. So it's a case of trying to find other ways to actually get through to that particular individual. Like I said, if for the resourceful amongst you, you will be able to find the relevant person. I think the one thing I found about the UAE compared to the UK, in answer to an earlier question, one other thing is that it is a very tight network compared to the UK. Even though UAE is a big country, but what you do find is once you are in this particular network, chances are that you are literally 1 or 2 degrees of separation away from another person. So leverage your network, leverage resources and tools that you have, such as LinkedIn. I think that would be a way to get it. But yes, if you have like an email which is a department name, that's a telltale sign. It's probably going to be read by a filter or something. But if you are mailing an individual, then chances are they will be seeing it. Now, the follow-up question you've asked is, would I be willing to receive a question or two via email? Absolutely, yes. So I think the lovely people at FinTech Hive can hopefully pass you my contact details, and happy to receive your question.